Twilight and the Outlander. They were running through the woods, well, as fast as they could go. Outlander's leg was still gnawed. The light was being suffocated by the darkness that surrounded them. Their time was running thin. They knew that if they didn't make it, they would surely die. They went as fast as their legs would take them. Eventually, they saw the house in the distance, but the void of darkness seeped around them. They could hear something moving in the trees behind them. Then, the Outlander, what seemed like a burst of adrenaline, sprinted faster, picking up Twilight and sprinting as fast as his legs could carry him. When he got to the house, he threw Twilight through the window. He could hear something crash within there, but he didn't care. He ran to the back shack, ran in, and slammed the generator button as the lights burst into life. He ran over, climbed through the window, and began barricading it. He had just slammed the hammer down on the last nail, securing the entrance, but also killing a possible escape route. He turned and saw Twilight there, cheeks puffed out in anger. "You know, you didn't have to throw me through the window. I could have went around." He stared and said, "Well, seeing as how things are, let me say this now. I didn't quite care. Our chances seemed to be dwindling at the time, so I did what I had to do. Look, I'm sorry for that, by the way." Twilight's cheeks were still puffed out, but she exhaled and smiled at him and said, "I don't know why, but I can't be mad at you." He smiled and said, "You're right, you can't be mad at me." He stopped. He heard it. He saw the shadows outside, but he also heard something else. When he looked out the window, his heart dropped. Coming out of the ground, from the mushrooms, was a humanoid figure. He pulled himself from the ground. It was like a hellish snow angel. It was a man, but he was covered in mushrooms. Anyone who looked at him, well, that was in the dark woods for a long time, knew what they were called. Mushroom men. He backed away from the window and said, "Twilight, get down, now!" Twilight, not one to argue, ducked underneath the workbench. He pulled his rifle off of his back, undid the bolt, slammed in a round, and quickly reloaded, slamming the bolt back in place. When he looked up, the mushroom man was sprinting, laughing. It was laughing. He didn't know if this was the insanity of the beast, or maybe it was a survivor at some point, but he didn't care. He aimed the weapon through the window, getting his sights on. His sights focused on the mushroom man as it was halfway. He fired. It slammed into the chest of the mushroom man, causing it to blow up. Everything above the waist was erupted in a reddish green. It was like gory confetti. He quickly reloaded his gun, staring out the window, waiting for any more of those fucking things to come. He didn't see any. He took a deep breath. Twilight, I think we're gonna be okay for a little bit. Then he heard screeching in the distance. Banshees were coming. No doubt about it. He knew what these things were capable of. He took a deep breath and knew it was out there somewhere. He didn't know if it was facing the house or where it was. What he did know is that these beings were slow. Their health was super low as well. The lights were flickering. He knew that when the lights were flickering, he knew it was them. He just knew. He took a deep breath and stepped back. He looked to his right and knew that Twilight, if he wasn't careful, she'd die. She would die. These things, whatever they were banshees, but if he wasn't careful, they'd kill her. He took a deep breath and realized what he had to do. He grabbed Twilight. She squeaked as he went over, pushed the one working lamp into a back room. She said, "What are you doing?" He looked and said, "I'm doing this for your own good." The other lamp had gone out. He pushed her inside, slamming the door with the only working lamp. He then pushed the couch in front of it. Twilight slammed her hooves on the door, begging the Outlander to rethink his decision. This was the only sentient creature he had seen in a long time. He wasn't about to lose his only friend to these fucking things. He listened. There was a lot of them. They were coming. He listened and knew there was probably 10, maybe 15. He quickly went over, slammed his hunting rifle on the table, crouched down, and grabbed it. He pulled it out from underneath the bench. It was an assault rifle. He took a deep breath and knew he'd have to use it. He then quickly ran around the side and went back in front of the door. Right now, he had an assault rifle, an axe, and a Molotov cocktail. He also had a pistol. He heard the front door open. The front door. If you were facing the front door, he was to the left, in another room. Past 2 rooms, they'd have to find him. They were hunting. He heard them go in the workbench room, along where his furnace was. He took a deep breath. He took a long, deep breath. Then, the door opened in front of him as a banshee ran toward him. It was the best way to describe a banshee was, well, he stared at it again in those soulless eyes. He knew it. He looked at it, and it was looking at him. Out of his right eye, out the window, crows were flying over the house. This thing, it looked like it had a black cloak all over its body, with a skull for a head. It looked like a mutated crow. When it charged, he aimed the assault rifle and fired 2 shots. The first one pierced its stomach and the first one pierced its chest, sending it flying back into the eternal darkness of the house. He heard more coming. He backed up against the door where the couch was and continued firing. 3 rushed in. They were mowed down immediately. Another 3 rushed in. He fired again. The first one had got clipped right in the face. The second one had gotten punctured 3 times in the chest. The third one was almost upon him when he shot it right in the throat and then right in the face. Fell over. He realized that he didn't reload his magazine. He remembered he used his assault rifle a few days ago and he forgot to reload it or put ammo in the existing magazine. He quickly yanked the clip out, throwing it on the floor and slamming a new one in. He could hear another one coming. He quickly set the assault rifle on the couch behind him, pulled out a Molotov cocktail, yanked his lighter out, lit the rag, and threw it. The second the first one came in, it slammed right into its face. Fire exploding. It was a combustion. The fire was like a disease. It quickly spread to the others as they just ran in the fire. The Outlander quickly fired round after round after round into the fire. None of them. There was no more. It appeared. He took one cautious step forward, and another, and another. When suddenly, a savage came through the doorway. It had a stick. It may not have been lethal, but a good shot to the temple, you'd be knocked out, and then they could kill you. So he had to be careful. It swiped at him with the stick. He ducked, moving backwards. He threw his assault rifle onto the couch, pulling out his axe. He waited. It charged forward, rising the stick, slamming it to the ground. He quickly evaded left, and then he charged forward, slamming the axe into its jaw, sending it reeling on the floor, and it let out pained grunts and whimpers and moans as it laid there on the floor. It was about to get up, but he slammed the axe into the back of its head, effectively killing it, ending its life. Roaches were crawling all over the floor. He backed up. He could hear them coming, more of them. But he could also feel the radiance of a new dawn approaching. He took a deep breath and stood there. Twilight was passed out on the floor. She had tear stains. It had been quiet out there. She was sleeping. Been quiet for so long she passed out crying, thinking she lost her friend. But after a little bit, the door, it sounded like something was getting pushed out of the way. The door opened and revealed the Outlander to see an unconscious Twilight. He lifted her up, went and laid on the couch, sitting her down on his chest, running his fingers through her hair, her mane, massaging the scalp, scratching behind your ear, whispering soft nothings into her ear that it was going to be okay, that everything was going to be okay. He saw a few small gashes on her body, a few cuts. He was worse for wear, but he used his medical supplies on her instead. When she woke up, she stared at him. This being, the Outlander, had saved her life, brought her into his home, gave her his food, gave her his medical supplies. He had no worry for his life. She could see the scarf softly move, as if he was smiling. She, in all of her time, had never seen a being who cared less about his life and his well-being than the ones around him. Truly, she'd have to save him, bring him back to Equestria. After a little while, he had handed her an apple, which she gladly ate, some water, and on top of that, some broth, some bread and potatoes. She began eating. He began eating a fish, an actual fish. She frowned, but decided not to say anything about it. She'd rather him be happy. After all, he did do a lot for her in her time of need. He just stared at her. But then she noticed that there was another figure in the room. It looked like a person wearing what appeared to be some kind of... She just stared. There were two beings in the room. The one on the right had a weird helmet on his head with an oval that was sideways for a visor. He was ragged, yet dressed. He had mittens on his hand, large ones at that. And in his hand he had a piece of coal. Saw tons of words that he would use to write, probably. And to his left, there was a bipedal creature. It had the face of a wolf, and what appeared to be the weapon that the Outlander had used on his back, which he later found was an assault rifle. The Wolfman looked and said, "Well, meat, you seem different. And who's this?" He kneeled down to stare at her, yellow spit drooling from his mouth a little bit, as he spit in the floor, stared at her. "I didn't think you'd have, this low standards, meat." He chuckled to himself as spit ejected from his mouth as he laughed. The wolf was implying that he had been banging Twilight. Twilight blushed, and the Outlander just shook his head. The person to his right, which she later found out was the traitor, stepped forward, put a hand on the Outlander's shoulder, and said, well, it didn't say, wrote down on the mitten. You've survived yet again. Take this, friend. It said a jury count on the floor. Twilight's head was spinning. This world was interesting. She needed to study. She immediately yanked out her book, her notebook, and her pencil, which it appeared to be, she later found out, as they only used quills in Equestria, and began writing down furiously about the bean. The lead broke, so she switched to a pen. She yanked off the cap. Seeing as how the Outlander had done it, she mimicked the act. She was furiously scribbling down, yanking the Wolfman's arms into a T-pose, writing down the length of everything. The Outlander smirked, let out a hearty laugh, and said, Twilight, is this how you greet all new friends?